back to Coaches at Crown Brew Getting Coffee. I want to welcome you back again. I want to welcome my guest, Mr. Fred Heinz. And Fred is a name known throughout Southern Illinois as far as the coaching and teaching profession. And he has been a mentor of mine and blessed my life many times over. We're anxious to have Fred on and talk about the coaching profession and his career and just all the things that he's experienced. I want to thank Crown Brew, of course. I want to thank Ross and Abby and Swinford Media for all they do to put this together. I want to thank my buddies at Adrenaline Fundraising. I had lunch with them last week, and I was so excited to hear about the number of coaches in this area that have chosen to do their fundraising with Adrenaline. And Jeff and Matt are great guys, and I know there's more of you out there that need fundraising help. And if you need to raise money for your program, see those guys at Adrenaline Fundraising. They'll take care of you. Great guys. It was great to catch up with them. Welcome, Fred Heinz.
Thank you.
Yeah, listen, Fred's a longtime Southern Illinois coach, teacher, as I said, mentor, including, as I said, a mentor of mine. And you know, I want to say this at the beginning, Fred. When I went through my toughest time as a coach, there were 3 people that encouraged me, and I'll never forget it. 3 guys that knew what I was going through and reached out when a lot of other people went silent. And one of those people was you. And I still have letters and cards and notes that you sent me when I was trying to rebuild the Marion program and things were not going well the first 3 years. But Fred Heinz would, just at the best times I needed, would send me a note or a card and say, keep your chin up, keep doing what you're doing. Just words of encouragement, Fred Heinz. And it meant a lot to me. So I know that's just who you are for a lot of people, and it meant a lot to me. Thank you, brother.
Well, you know, our friendship goes back a long way. You know, like I said, I've been in the game for 35 years, teaching and coaching, and I don't know if you remember, but I'll start with the first time I met you. They came to me and said, hey, we have a young student teacher that wants to be in football. And at that time, I was working for Harry Stewart at Benton. Harry didn't want anything to do with it, so he said, if you want him, you take him. And I asked your name, and I said, where did he play ball at? And they said, Salem. I said, well, I know Chuck Buddy real well. I'm calling Chuck. So that was my first phone call, yeah. And he gave you raving reviews and said it couldn't go wrong. So I was on board from that. That was a very good recommendation. Yeah. And I trusted his judgment and respected his judgment. And I don't know if you remember the first time he came out, I told you to get a t-shirt, shorts, and a whistle and shoes. And I put you to work right away. I told you you're going to work with our secondary people. And I basically laid out just general rules, what I wanted to look for, this and that. And I wanted to see what you could do. And you did a great job. Mike Selmo was the other assistant coach, and he was very impressed. And he's like, are you going to turn him loose? I said, yeah. And I said, we'll mentor him along the way. Yeah. But I said, you know, he's got to work. Yeah. So that's how it started. And then, gosh, like I said before, I followed you all through your career. Yeah. You know, Flora and Sparta and then Carterville and then Marion. And it was fun to watch. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And you and Salmo, we coached the JV together, and we kind of had our own little team, you know, and you guys did give me a lot of leeway to do what I needed to do under whatever you told me. These are the schemes we want, the routes we want, the coverage we want. And it was a great experience to start my coaching career as a student teacher at Benton and to work for you guys. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun. We had a great bunch of kids. They were a lot of fun to be around. And it was, as I said, a cool start to my career right there at Benton. I wanted to stay there, by the way. I told Coach Groves that. I said, I wanted to stay in Benton. I was hoping a job would open up, and it didn't. But I did land in Sparta. We'll talk about that a little bit down the road. But I want to talk a little bit, Fred, about your background. Let's talk about growing up. You're a Carbondale guy. Well, not originally. I'll kind of give you a real brief history. I was actually born in Mobile, Alabama, and grew up in the South. My dad played at SIU for Coach Martin there, and he was out of the Korean War. And he actually played semi-pro ball for the Quaker Oats Company down in Mobile.
Oh, wow.
And then we left Mobile and moved to Pensacola, Florida. And he played with another group. And he had his degree from SIU in education. And then we made a brief journey back to Illinois, to Gillespie, Illinois, where he's from. My grandfather was there and wasn't doing well, so we went back for 2 years to kind of take care of him. And then the next thing I know, we were in Virginia, and he was getting his master's and doctorate degree. And we went from Southern Virginia, Richmond, and we ended up in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax. And I was in 3rd grade. And they started tackle football in 3rd grade.
Wow.
And that was an eye-opener for me. It's very much the South was still segregated. The blacks had their school, their part of town. The whites had their part of town. And the only time we ever got together, the big thing back then growing up was the Pop Warner. If you could get into the Pop Warner Bowl, I mean, thousands of people would watch. Football was huge there. Yeah. And the South football is still king. Yeah. And that was the first time that I ever had association with black kids, African-American kids, was when you made the All-Star team. In Northern Virginia, we played Southern Virginia and whatever, and we had a really good group. And to this day, I have a childhood friend that's still one of my very good friends. His name is Mike Kruzig. And Mike went on to Boston College, was starting quarterback for them. And then he was Terry Bradshaw's backup quarterback for the Steelers when they won all those Super Bowls. Yeah. He always still has all his rings. But great. We always stayed in touch. Yeah. We played from 3rd grade on, all the way up. And then, anyway, we left Virginia my 8th grade summer. And, of course, you had the beaches and everything and the ocean. I mean, it was a fun time. There was a lot of things to do. We were all the schools had swim teams, but that's all you did. Sports was king. You did football, and then you did basketball, then you did baseball, and then you swam in the summer. And
that's a good life.
Oh, it was. It was fun. So then Dad, he said, well, we're moving to Carbondale, Illinois. I'm like, where's Carbondale, Illinois?
Yeah,
I said, we're going to leave the ocean? And he's like, well, they got Crab Orchard Lake.
That's the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, so, but moving to a university town again, in the 60s, there was a lot of fun things to do. I mean, the university town, watching all the sports and the players, and, so it was a good transition. But again, for the first time, back then too, Carbondale, people don't realize, had 3 high schools.
Oh, really?
They had Carbondale Central was for the public school. They had Carbondale University School, which was basically for university, doctors, lawyers, kind of the prestigious school. And then you had Attucks High School, which was the black high school.
I didn't know that, yeah.
So when we moved there in '67, that was the first year they put all the schools together.
Oh, wow.
And it seemed like there were fights every day. I mean,
really?
it was really... And people don't understand this, and I showed the kids when I took over the Carbondale program. My freshman year, we had 100 kids out for freshman football.
Wow.
So they didn't have enough uniforms, so half of us wore university high school uniforms, the other half wore Carbondale black and white. Golly. And we would drive 3 school buses to our away games.
Those were the days.
I mean, it was crazy, Our junior year, junior varsity, we had 70 kids. And by the time I was a senior, we had 65 kids. But, that was in the 60s, early 70s. Yeah. So people just don't understand the numbers and the support. And, of course, where the Carbondale High School is now, that was Carbondale East. Right. That was typically just a freshman class high school. And then everybody else was bused to Central, sophomore, junior, senior. Wow. So it was a big transition.
Yeah, I mean, you were part of that. I didn't know you grew up outside of Carbondale. I thought you were born and raised there.
Oh, no.
That's fascinating. And then, but that's Carbondale's heyday, right? I mean, the 60s and 70s, Carbondale and the university were flourishing, and it was a big time.
We had great athletes and mentors that I had still to this day. Like Bob Pankey, he was the All-State quarterback. Coach Pollock was my coach, Vern Pollock, and I learned a lot from him. But again, the way things were set up, and Coach Walt Moore was my basketball coach. And what you did is you got up in the morning, you went to the football field, you did 2.5 hours of football workout at the old Blyer Field, then you ran up to the gymnasium and you played pickup games till noon for basketball, and then you, if you got a work schedule in, you tried to get work in because at night you're playing Legion baseball. So, you know, you really didn't have time to get in any trouble or
too tired to get in trouble.
Yeah, but you know, that's just what you did back then. You never questioned it.
No.
When coaches asked you to do, you did it.
Amen, brother.
And
that's right.
You know, it's just a different time now with kids.
Yeah, it really is, and I appreciate you sharing that because that is a cool insight into a history of Carbondale that I didn't know either. I didn't know that when you went there were still 3 high schools. But that's really cool. So you're a multi-sport guy. You played football, baseball, basketball.
Right.
And football was your best sport, you think?
Well, you know, also you got to throw in track.
Oh.
Track wasn't my choice, but we had Bill Yates was the backfield coach, and he was the head track guy. So on rainy days in baseball that you weren't playing, he would come down the hallway and throw a track uniform in your face and say, "You're running the 400 today. You're running the 800." And I'm like, you know. And then one time he stuck me in hurdles, and but you didn't say no.
No. Yes, sir.
And I'll never
great.
forget that. You know,
That's
just
great.
I didn't enjoy it. And then, you know, we had some speedsters back then at Carbondale, some guys that could just fly. So when you did the mile relay team, I was the slow guy. I ran a 52.8, and I was always the second guy. And the other 3 kids were happened to be black kids. They were running 49s, 50 flat, you know, I mean 48s, and 2 of them went to SIU for their track program. So that was okay. I just had to not get passed up, and I know
don't lose it for them.
Then they'd take care of the rest. So, but it was fun.
Yeah, you played quarterback in high school.
Yeah. Well, actually, my freshman sophomore year, I got to play quarterback and defensive back. But again, Coach Pollock had a rule that once you got to varsity, all you did was quarterback. You couldn't play defense anymore, and that kind of was. I enjoyed playing defense too.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a long story. This is what happened for me. Started my junior year. We had a good year, good team. We actually got beat, though, for the conference by Centralia. They won it. We got second. And Heron had a good group of kids then, too. They had a little speedster, Rodney Jones, which was pretty good. He was pretty fast. But anyway, my senior year, started off at quarterback, and our secondary was getting beat. And I was captain of the football team my senior year. This was a great learning lesson for me. And I didn't realize it till later on to get into coaching about team versus yourself. But he came to him and he said, "Hey, you're the captain." He said, "I need you to go back and play defensive secondary." I said, "What about quarterback?" He said, "You have to give that up." Ooh. And he said, "You go home and think about it. Do you want to play quarterback for yourself, or do you want to play defensive back for the team?" So I went home and talked to my dad, and I said, and I was getting offers from schools about the quarterback position. And I was really scared about it. And my dad said, "Do you sleep on it?" He said, "It's your decision. I'm not going to tell you what to do." So I went back the next day, and I have just the utmost respect for Coach Pollock. And I told him, okay. Scott Otteson was my backup quarterback. He was a junior, but he was going to be good. And so I went ahead and went over to the other side of the ball. Well, long story short, we always played Murphysboro at the end of the year, always on a Saturday. Standing room crowds only. It was awesome, the Murphy-Carbondale complex. Well, Murphysboro had Tim Brown, great quarterback. They were Southwest Egyptian, that old conference champion. And they were all picked to beat us and stuff and everything. And we had a lackluster year that year. Anyway, Scott got hurt in the very first series. So I thought, well, he's going to put in another junior or something. And he came and said, "Fred, you're going both ways." I thought my prayers have been answered. So I got star of the game, had a great game. Well, I didn't realize, but Coach Towers and the defensive back coach was there, and Coach Haley, and I actually got a scholarship offer for them after that game.
Wow, from SIU?
From SIU.
Wow.
And I had an offer from SEMO at the time. I looked into Murray State, but I thought, hey, this is the best situation. But that's how that story happened.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
awesome.
you know,
Appreciate you sharing that. That's
but
great.
and I would share that with kids. You know, a lot of times, is it about yourself or is it about the team and
But
your
it all
teammates?
worked out, though. It all
It
worked
did.
out for you, yeah. Because I
It
think,
did.
you know, there's an old saying, you know, do the next right thing. And I think you just did the right thing and let things play out, and it worked out for you. And
Yeah, but it wasn't easy.
no, I understand
I'll tell you,
that.
I was
understand
conflicted
that.
with it.
Yeah, well, I understand that. Especially when you got to make a decision like that as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot to go home and think about, you know.
Yep.
Especially when you were wondering, could this result in the loss of a scholarship opportunity? You know, that's a big
didn't
deal,
know.
Fred. But I think that story, the best part about it, Fred, is that I think it speaks volume of exactly who you are. And I mean that.
Well, I appreciate
I think that it didn't surprise me what your decision was going to be when you started telling the story. I said, I know what Fred Heinz is going to do. You went to SIU. You played quarterback at SIU.
Well, that's another story. I went in as a quarterback. That summer, they put us to work out at Little Grassy Camp. And there were a couple track guys and a basketball guy and 3 football players. And so we worked out there at Little Grassy during the day, building roads, doing tree. I mean, we just did all the stuff around the camp. And it was a camp for special need kids. And I had never really been around special need kids that much. And then we'd come in the evenings and do our workout. So all that summer, I did the quarterback workout stuff. Well, that was the year, this was 1971, and you could not play varsity football as a freshman. So we had a freshman team. We had an 8-game schedule, and then you could play sophomore, junior, senior. Well, we started our workouts, and at the time at SIU, you had Mike O'Boyle, Denny O'Boyle. Coach O'Boyle was the defensive coach. They had a younger brother, Kevin O'Boyle, who was a quarterback in Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah.
So Kevin comes in, and we start, and Kevin's getting all the reps. We're doing a pass skeleton, and this is another true story. Coach Berg, the defensive back coach for the freshmen, standing next to us, and we had a couple kids from Chicago, whatever this and that, and I said, I can cover guys better than them. He said, oh, really? Well, the next practice, I go out there, and he goes, Fred, come over here on the defensive side. So I go, okay. So I go over there, and we practice stuff. The next thing I know, I was the starting defensive back.
Wow.
So I started defensive back, and he told me, he said, you're the auxiliary quarterback. I said, what does that mean? He goes,
What does that
if
mean?
our guys get hurt,
Yeah.
you got to still go to both meetings and know. So that's how that transpired. Well, in the middle of the year, Kevin went down, and I can't remember, he had a kid from Tennessee or something. And there was another kid named Paul Spolowski from Chicago. He was the other quote-unquote auxiliary quarterback. And we had a kid from Carmine, Kevin Kane, that was up and down with different things. So
Was that Coach Kane's son?
I think it
Remember?
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
A legend over there in the Carmine, Flora area,
Yeah.
Coach Kane, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, long story short, I was more on the defensive side of the ball with that. So become my sophomore year, I just told him, heck, I'll just stick with defense. But from a coaching standpoint, and at that time I didn't know I wanted to get into coaching, sitting in on both meetings, really I saw the X and O's.
That's
and
great.
you know,
Yeah.
that was really beneficial.
That's great.
So
Yeah.
that was a fun story.
Yeah. How
Be
was the,
careful what you say
That's
to
right.
people.
How was the team during that era? What was your records? I mean, how good was SIU?
I think freshmen, my 2 roommates were both from Nashville, Pat Forres and Bob Hobby. And the other suite mate was Ted Wise. He was from Jacksonville, Illinois. And we were 500. We played Middle Tennessee, Illinois State,
Right.
you know, pretty much all the MVC schools.
And how was the varsity at that time?
Varsity was, I think they were either 6 and 5. Anyway, Brad Pancos, that's how me and Brad, our association, he was the quarterback at that time for the varsity.
That's great.
And then, of course, O'Boyle was the linebacker.
Yeah.
And when we talk about all my experiences and all the schools that I coached at, there was the SIU connection.
Yeah.
And just things.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. It's very unusual, but I coached at 5 different schools, and I always left when it was my choice.
Yeah.
And
That's a rare thing in this profession.
Oh, it is. But
Yeah.
you know, I
Yeah.
start off at Fairfield with Michael Boyle, And that was another story. I had first signed originally with Harrisburg. I actually signed a contract to go coach with Ken Joggers at Harrisburg.
Of course.
Well, Boyle calls me up and he says, hey, he says, you want to come over to Fairfield and we'll have a beer and we'll sit down and talk. Bill Garrett's the AD, and we sat down and talked, and Bill's like, Fred, he goes, they're just going to have you do football and basketball. At Harrisburg, he goes, I know you like baseball too. He said, if you come here, you can be varsity assistant in football, you can be a freshman basketball, and you can be varsity assistant baseball. You can coach all three. I'm 21, I'm single, I'm like.
More money?
Yeah, at that time, yeah. I think I started, Kerry, whopping coaching 3 sports and teaching. I think I made $10,000, seriously.
Yeah, I believe
and
it.
I had to get a bus driver's license to drive the baseball team bus.
Yeah, so times have changed.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Times have
and Mike and us, we used to have to line the football field, and I had to line the baseball field for baseball games, and that was just part of your job description.
Yeah, I lived that myself at Sparta a few times. So
Oh, yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Well, then, I left that, and I went to Mount Vernon. Brad Pan, coach, was there. Mike went on to Greenville to coach, and so I was 2 years with Brad at Mount Vernon, and Dr. Dixon at the time, he's like, Fred, he goes, you got 5 years teaching. He said, it's time you get your master's. I said, oh, he goes, no, he said, come down, you got 5 years, you can teach, and it won't cost you a thing. And he said, I've already talked to Doug Woolard, you can go over to Carbondale. Jim Levin is the coach at Carbondale now. He's another SIU connection. He said, you can coach varsity football with Jim and be Doug's assistant for varsity basketball. No brainer, so I go that route.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple years. And then, of all people, Rich Heron, I run into him, and he's like, Fred, you're not making any money. He said, you're just coaching, and you got your master's now behind you. He said, and that was at the time when the mines were really going big at Benton, and Benton paid well.
Yeah.
And he said, if you come, he said, I'm looking for a head baseball coach too. He said, you can come in with Harry Stewart, coach football. Rich is like, you can freshman basketball, and then you can be head baseball coach. So that was my next venture. I did that for 8 years. And when
that's where I met you.
Yes, and that's where you came to student teach.
1986, the fall of '86, I was assigned there and got to be with you. And it's funny, as you tell these stories, this profession is so big on networking. The people that you meet and the people that you have end up.
Oh, exactly.
Those paths connect over and over again. This is such a cool thing, the way everything's intertwined.
Yeah, and so, then I'm looking around, I'm thinking, okay, I got some time under my belt. Well, then there's an opening at Murphysboro. And I was in the Final Four. It was me, and again, Ken Joggers, and then Jim Woodward, and then Dave Hanna. Yeah. And they wanted a head coach and an AD, and I said, no, I don't want an AD. I just want to do the coaching. So I thought, that's done. Yeah. So they hired Jim. Yeah. Well, Jim had actually taken my job at Mount Vernon with Brad. So we had another connection there. And he calls me up and he said, hey, he said, why don't you come to Murphy? I said, well, I've already, he said, no. He goes, you'll be my varsity assistant. And at the time, Steve Stewart was the head basketball coach, and Steve and I played against each other, during the late 60s and 70s. He was from Benton. Sounds like a no-brainer, so I took that route, and then I was there for 10 years. Yeah. And then I left at the end when Jim left. I went to Carbondale, and then stayed and finished up my career back at the home school. Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit and let's talk about you have been a part of some very good basketball programs as well.
Sure.
I mean, I think Mount Vernon, a lot of success there in basketball. You coached basketball at Carbondale and made it to the finals with Jim Miller, right?
Yep.
So did you feel like did you prefer coaching football? Did it matter to you? You love the basketball side of it too?
I think, again, growing up in Carbondale, when the time, I feel very blessed for being at Carbondale when I was there in the late 60s, early 70s. And and I think about, I started off, every basketball coach that I coached with are now they were all Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
Bill Garrett at Fairfield, Keith Law at Mount Vernon, of course Rich Herron at Benton, Doug Woolard at Carbondale, and then Jim Miller at Carbondale, and then Darryl Murphy at Murphysboro.
That's a great
So
thing. That,
when you think about all those guys, it was a great experience. And then, of course, those last 2 years at Carbondale, when we went to the state, we had a hell of a team, but we got beat by Northbrook. They had John Shire, who's now the head coach at Duke.
Yeah.
And we couldn't stop him. He was a 6'5" guard. Our kids were 6'1", 6'2", and he kept posting us up. He must have shot 20 free throws. But we only lost by 10.
Yeah.
But we had a really good group, and that was an experience.
Good time. Yeah. That's awesome. And then I want to go back a little bit. Your time, you are part of the Murphysboro Carbondale rivalry. Let's talk about that a second, including the 100th game.
Oh my gosh.
So are you, I don't know the answer to this. Are you the only person that's been the head coach of both schools?
Yes. I got a certificate from Terry Bryant, the legislature. They had the celebration of the 100th game between the two schools, Carbondale, Murphysboro, 100 years. And I was the only one that's been back and forth. Now, Dwayne Kelly, my good buddy that was my teammate, he coached basketball at Murphysboro, and he assisted at Carbondale, but as a head coach, no. But it's funny, when I took that job, I actually had fellow teammates call me Benedict Arnold,
you took the Murphy job.
traitor. My gosh, you'd have thought.
I was going to ask you what that was like.
Oh well, when we usually had to get dressed at the old Bowen Gym and walk down to the field.
Yeah, right.
When you would walk down the field, the houses on the side there, a couple of those, they would sit up on the roof, and kids would be looking up, and they'd be screaming all that stuff. And I said, don't pay attention to them. And the funny thing, Coach Lovin, he had very bad knees. And it'd take him forever to get from the school down to the field. So for the first 2-3 minutes, he'd just say, Fred,
you got this.
Yeah, you got this. Just call it. And then he'd finally show up down there.
I can still vividly remember him making his way there at halftime and coming down those steps. And
he had braces on both knees. And I tell you what, again, he forgot more football than I'll ever. But he was something.
So 2004. You take the head coaching job at Carbondale, Southern Illinois, Coach of the Year.
Yeah, that was fun. We took a team that they'd never won as freshmen, never won as sophomore. They were 2-7 as juniors. And when we got all things together and stuff, Rick Moss was the athletic director. And again, I thank Tom O'Boyle. He really came to bat for me. Steve Murphy was the other young man that was applying for the job, and he had a big connection with his dad being the judge of Williamson County or whatever. And Tom really spoke up for me. So when we got together, I told him I wanted Greg Douglas with me. I'd known Greg from Pinckneyville when he was with Glenzie and all those guys. And Scott Ellis, who was a teammate of mine, I wanted him as a special teams coach. And they said, we don't have a salary. I said, just take it out of my salary. I want him there. I said I want him to handle the punters and kickers, and Greg was going to do the defense, and I had Steve help out with that. And then Coach Kill, bless his heart, he was a godsend. Coach Kill helped me out more than people will ever know. Yeah. I got to sit in on their meetings. I got to take my teams over for spring ball, fall ball. But we had a lot of conversations, and we would meet at Pinch Penny and have a beer every now and then. But he was a godsend. He would say, I got a graduate student here, played ball for me, blah, blah, blah. And I had a couple of his kids. I made a freshman coach, sophomore coach.
Yeah, getting that experience,
Yeah, and I had two young men that were former players from Murphysboro, Mark Albertini and Ben Campos.
Of course.
And I hired them as my sophomore coaches. And Ben
they've been there a lot,
Ben's still coaching at Carbondale, and Mark was a principal and then an AD. I'm proud of those two kids.
Absolutely.
They have really, really done some stuff.
I did not know they go back that far with you.
Oh,
That's
gosh.
Really
well,
great.
Of course, I think back of tough losses. I have to bring it up. The Carterville-Murphysboro Championship, you beat us. And, I still tell people to this day, Mark Albertini was such a good kicker.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times he makes that field goal.
You're talking second round, 1996 playoffs. We traveled to Murphy, 3A playoffs, round 2, and it was a great game.
23-21.
I mean, a great game. And you lined up for a field goal to win the game with a kicker that we knew had the leg to make it.
Yep.
And he just missed it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was pandemonium for us anyway. So.
Oh, yeah, we did the 2-minute drill, got it down within his range. And, and it was the toughest part is we had an outstanding player. People never really got to understand how good he was Dietrich Rogers, our running back. And he was legally blind in one eye. But the things he could do, people stopped kicking to him, punting to him, because he could take it to the house every time. So we actually put him on the line, and this is a true story. I saw that young man. He was so quick and so fast. The punter caught the ball, and as he was going to kick it, Dietrich snatched it off his toe and went the other directions for for a touchdown. And he was amazing. He
was phenomenal. And we said after all those playoff games in that 96 run that we felt like Murphysboro matched up better with us, with our team, size-wise and speed-wise, than anybody else we played. And that's taking nothing from DuQuoin. That's taking nothing from Massac or Heron or Spring Valley Hall. We just thought matchup-wise, you had the size to match us and you had the speed to match us, so we knew it was going to be a battle.
Yeah, we lost Dietrich the game before. We had beat Payne at freezing cold weather. He's through the end zone, and this kid comes and hits him, helmet and shoulder pads, right through the hamstrings, and he was hurt. All we could do was use him as a decoy. I mean, I was surprised he even walked after that, and that crippled us. So we had to use Michael Marks and Mark Albertini really a lot on our offensive scheme, more than we normally did. But, hey, you win some, you lose some, but that one hurt. And
well, I'm glad you brought it up so I didn't have to.
But, if you just don't take losses like that. But I was so proud of you and proud of your staff.
Yeah.
And for you guys to be state champions, that even made it even better.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you this question because you alluded to it earlier about Little Grassy Camp. What prompted you to go into special education?
Well,
because that is to me a very difficult job. Can be, I'm sure, a very rewarding job, but it's challenging. And you did that. You embraced that.
Well, and this is another story. When we would come in for lunch, we had to eat in the mess hall with all the kids and the counselors. And there was one little boy, and I can't even remember his name, but he was just thrilled that we were football players and stuff. And he'd always want to sit with us. And like I said, I had never had much exposure or any interaction with special need kids.
So special ed's not on the radar right now. At that time, you weren't thinking.
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. I mean, I had no intention I was just going to go into education. I got my elementary degree and secondary degree. But anyway, as we did that, I went to Coach Towers. By the end of that summer, I said, if I come back next summer, I would like to work with these kids and not be on the maintenance crew.
Yeah.
And so the next summer I came back and they made me a campout specialist, and I would take the kids on 2-day overnights. Well, another Marion person was Gordon Ritchie. He was a varsity football player. He worked down at the beach. He was a lifeguard. And Brian Newlands was the linebacker, and he was a lifeguard. And like I said, we would work out and then go into the school to do workouts. So that worked out. So after that summer, I went ahead and changed my major, and I picked up a EMH and an LD and a BD certificate. I had to go to night school and summer school and stuff to pick all that up. But most of the schools I went to after that, they even broke it down more, and they called these kids at risk. They were at risk. So I was a science also person. So I taught the science for kids from freshman to senior year that had to have a science degree to graduate. They were short of credit. So I would have freshmen to seniors. But I enjoyed those kids. As long as you gave them respect, I got respect back. And I always would tease them and tell them they needed this more than I needed it.
Yeah.
And I got them through. And to this day, I think that's one of the rewards. After 50 years, you see them and they still call you coach.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, you made a difference. You kept me in school.
Yeah.
So those, salary never entered into the picture. It was those other intangible relationships that you have.
Yeah. You served as a student teacher coordinator for SIU.
Well,
so you are basically traveling to area schools, and kids are assigned to observe or to student teach in the Johnson County, Union County areas, right?
Right.
So you are their SIU contact.
Right.
And you're going to watch them go through their student
Sure.
teaching process.
Yeah, that was another one. When I retired from coaching and teaching, I told them I got my years in. Liz Gershbacher was actually working for the university. She came through and she said, we have an opening and you'd be great for it. I said, what are you talking about? She said, why don't you come over, interview? And Dr. Jan Wagner was the head of the education department then. And she said, you live down in Cobden now. My wife, they had a family farm, 600 acres that we were caretakers of. I don't farm or anything, but there's always something going on you got to do. But she said, yeah, she said, you'd be a clinical supervisor. You go around the Johnson Union County schools, you'll supervise. You've had 35 years teaching, coaching. And Bill Rogers from Christopher was doing it. Kenny McAnally from Marion, he was doing
Worked
it.
with Kenny
And
a
they were
lot.
all administrators too.
Yeah.
And so we had a fun group.
Yeah,
and
that's-
Bob Nimps from Benton was there.
That's a good bunch.
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun together. So I interviewed, got the job, and I finished up 10 years doing that.
Yeah.
And what was nice is you could schedule your own schedule, the times that you would observe students. And they had kids, at the time, the education program was very full. I had 50 kids in my caseload.
Oh my God.
Now, sadly, I talk to people and it's dwindled just unbelievable. And I see a lot of the principals and stuff, and they say, we don't have kids anymore. What happened?
No.
And it's just changed. It's a shame.
Fred, I had close to 20 student teachers in my career, maybe more than that. I've got a list on my phone, and I sat down one day and I thought about all the young people that came through, and I go back to Marion, and they say we just don't see it. Now I think there's one there right now, but it's not like it used to be. There used to be 4 or 5 or 6 in the building at a time, and that's just in a semester, and it's changed a lot.
Oh yeah, we would go far north as past Mount Vernon, and far south is Dongola, and east west. It's a shame.
And now we have a crippling teacher shortage. And
yes,
it's a shame that it's been that way, because SIU is such a hub for those young teachers, and a place where they could go and get their start and be mentored by guys like you and others, and Ken McAnally, as you said, and Bob, but that's where I came through the system with John McIntyre and some others, and such a great experience. The education experience I got at SIU was great in my degree area, but it was also great in my master's area. So I was very blessed. I've got some other questions for you real quick, and these are just kind of bullet point questions. But who would you say are who were your biggest influences, as far as, and it could be teacher or coach, either one?
Well, like I said, playing Coach Pollock and Coach Walt Moore were phenomenal as mentors, and I didn't know that back then, but as I started coaching and stuff, I saw more and more of what they did and how they did it, and that inspired me as well. My own dad, he was a coach as well, and growing up, he always coached us in Little League on up. As for coaching wise, Brad Pankos definitely sticks out in my mind. Doug Woolard, again, basketball wise, and Jim, we had great success. At Murphysboro, Jim Woodward, Mark Bullock, the three of us, we had that was a lot of fun, a lot of fun during that time. And then, of course, Greg Douglas and the staff that I had at Carbondale, I couldn't be happier. Like I said, I was very fortunate to pick and choose when I left and go, and different programs and different styles, just how the game has changed itself. And if you're in it for 35 years, I got tons of stories that I share with kids, and I tell them I use your story here and there, and boy, they perk up. You remember that? Or I don't know if you know Gary Denniston, the news reporter.
Yeah, of course I know Gary.
Well, Gary was also a teammate of mine at Carbondale, and I tell this story. When I took over the Carbondale program, it was chaotic from when Gene Boley left. And he came out to film us and interview us and whatever. And I told Gary, I said, I want to nip this in the bud very first day. I need your help. He goes, what do you need? I said, I made the point when the coaches speak, I don't want anybody else to talk.
Right.
So I want you to purposely start talking to one of the players back there when I'm speaking. He said, okay. And I said, I'm going to tell you to drop your camera and give me a lap around the field. So he starts talking. I said, hey, I said, we got a rule. Nobody talks when the coach is talking. I said, give me a lap. So he picks his camera off his book, and he starts around, and the kids' eyes are like that big. And they're like, oh, you know. And, you know, but you just got to have some fun with some things. And I saw him the other day when we were watching Carbondale Mount Vernon play in the regional, and I was telling him, I said, you can't believe the number of times I've told your story.
Great.
And he was laughing. He said, I thought I was going to die.
That's great. That is great. So you've had time, as you and I have talked, to kind of reflect on your career now, because you don't have time when you're coaching to reflect. You're worried about the next season, and we both had time to do that now. When you reflect back on your career of 35 years of doing it, what stands out for you?
You know, I think about that a lot. The good teams, the conference championships, the playoff teams, they were always good, and they got their due. But I think about the teams that were 1-8, 2-7, 3-6. They weren't great teams, and you know what? Those kids never left.
Yeah.
They never complained.
Great point.
They fought through it. The community was not really behind them. And I told him, I said, you know, in life, if this is the worst thing to happen to you, you've lived a very lucky life.
Amen.
But I think back to those kids. They could have walked away at any time.
That's right.
They could have gave up. Like I said, the championship teams and the great teams, that's easy because you had the athletes that could do and perform and achieve. But these kids are giving you the best that they had. They weren't great football players, but they were good people.
And they're playing our game. There's a lot of respect for the kids that say, I want to be a player, and didn't run off when things got tough.
Right. Well, you know, and one of the sayings I always put up in the room for all the coaches is that, you know, a good coach will make you a better player, but a great coach will make you a better person. Amen. And I really believe in that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're going to have struggles in life. And anybody who persevered, and you know, on those hot, dusty, long, just you're sweating your tail off and you're beat physically and that, but you persevere. You know, you came out the other end of that. And that makes a difference. And your teammate, the camaraderie, it's bigger than you.
Yeah, and if you could take one thing from the game as a player, I hope kids take away that perseverance to be able to go through something tough, something difficult, some adversity, and stay with it.
Well, you know, if you're going to put that much work and effort into it, it's got to mean something to you.
That's right.
You just don't go through the motions. And, you know, a lot of parents have a hard time with that. You know, they would come to me and say, my son went through every workout, every this, that, but he's not starting. I said, you know what? There are kids that were better than him. And you got to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, he gave his best effort, but he never was quite good enough to be the starter. And I said, why would you minimize your son's effort and all the, you know, that he put into it? And I would tell kids, you're never out of it. It's always the next man up. You never know when the opportunity is going to present itself. And but you know, there was a disconnect with a lot of parents.
Sometimes they become emotionally invested in some ways, and they kind of, I think, sometimes lose their perspective. But,
you
know, it happens, and you know, I think it's a struggle, and I think so. Having said that, kind of on to the next point, but what's your thoughts of coaching today compared to when you and I started? I mean, you have concerns, like I have some concerns.
Very big concerns.
Yeah.
you know, a lot of things that I don't like that I see today. And, you know, I was very blessed, too, that we both have a good friend, Roger Light, that we had pregame meals. He's lined it up every church in town.
Yeah.
We would have a pregame meal at that church. And I told kids it's not to convert you, but they want to be part of this. And it was a community thing as well.
Right.
And Roger, again, was a Carbondale, you know, old boy that I knew forever. And his fellowship of Christian athletes that he did, there's not a better person for him and Sharon. But he helped out a lot, and it brought us closer together. You know, with that, the problem with today is I don't see that connection. It's too much about myself and me, my stats, this, that. And now with this transfer portal and the NIL, I see and I hear young kids are not talking about the love of the game anymore. It's about show me the money.
Yeah.
You know, where's it going to take me?
Yeah.
You know, what can it get me? And it's all me, me, me. And again, I think it breaks down that team concept. And my fear, especially for college, is if you have a lineman lockering next to you and you're the star quarterback or the running back and you're getting hundreds of thousands to play and they're getting a college scholarship, whatever, I just don't see how that is fundamentally a building point for team camaraderie. And college coaches that I talk to talk about that.
They do.
They lose
they do.
that coach and player relationship now. Now it's going to be one and done, shop around for the next. You got guys hopping to 3 and 4 schools, and it trickles down. And our young kids are seeing that.
Yeah, we're losing that ability for a player to develop, to be not the starter, but have to work harder to become the starter. Instead, they look for the next place they can go. And don't get me wrong, the portal in itself is not all bad. There's some good things about it. But I think there's a pendulum swing where it's kind of gotten out of control in some cases.
Well, you know, and I think you look close to home like SIU, it's a mid-major, and look at the young men that we've lost in the last couple years because we couldn't have a payday.
Yeah,
and,
right,
you know,
exactly, yeah.
and the big schools, they had the boosters and things, they can handle those payday requests. And I tell this story too. When I signed with SIU, we got an NCAA check of $15 a week, and that was for laundry and you got your food all the way up till Saturday. So Sunday you had to scramble.
That was your NIL money.
Oh, we would go to all our smorgasbords as we could on Sunday.
Well, so what do you think then? I'm like you. I have these concerns. I think about young coaches lasting 35 years. That's going to be a tough road. I'm not saying they can't do it, but it's just going to be a tougher road. And the days of playing and doing what you can to please the coach, now I feel like the coach has got to do what he can to please the player. And I think that's a big change. And it's something that young coaches are navigating. But what would you say for yourself? You've been around a lot of success, a lot of successful coaches, successful yourself. What would you say are a couple of keys in your mind to being a successful coach? If a young guy's watching this and says, what does Fred Heinz think are a couple of keys to being successful?
I would tell you right off the bat, if you're going to be a head coach, you better realize you can't do it yourself. You better have a quality staff. You better have people that are knowledgeable, people that are willing to work, to go to clinics, to again, better themselves.
Yep.
You don't have all the answers, and you got to be flexible to change. You know, in high school, you get what you get. And, you know, you can't go out and recruit for positions. So you better have a really good base knowledge of what skill level you have coming in and what you perceive as going out. You know, I would give you an example too. I had a young man at Carbondale, Mike O'Day. He was our biggest kid. He was 6'5", 230, and never touched the ball. He had to play offensive, defensive tackle. When he walks on at SIU, they make him a tight end, and he wins the national championship with Coach Dempsey and catches a touchdown against East Carolina. And the first time I see him, he says, "Hey, Coach, how you like my hands?" You know, you know. So you never know how kids are going to develop from freshman to senior.
Never give up on a kid.
And you know, again, I think again, and people get so focused on wins and losses, and they don't see the development of young men. and like I said, you can have all the wins and stuff, but I really tried to think about, did we make this a better person? Was he a good citizen?
That's right.
You know, how did he do in school? And we had a little thing at Carbondale that I called reminders. And if a kid got in trouble in school, after practice, all the coaches and everybody would leave the field and go home. I stayed as the head guy. And we did jingle jangles, 100 yards until their tongue hung out. And they would say, I'm not coming back.
I'd say, take care of those grades.
Yeah, so you behave. And, you know, those are teachable moments, things like that, that I think you get more out of.
Yeah. Let's close with this, Fred. What's retirement now? You travel?
Oh, gosh. You know, I told my wife after 35 years, and I expressed this to you, you have a godsend wife. Tracy, people to understand wives of coaches, what they go through and what I mean, you're gone every day from 8 till 7 or 8 at night.
And that's physically, not just
and then, you know, ball games, you don't get home till like sometimes 2 in the morning because you sit afterwards and you're looking at film and doing this and that. Your summers are all dictated by practice times. So you either got to squeeze in a weekend or a week, you know, before. And like you said before, your mind is also already going already. But I got practice on Monday. I got to get things lined up. So the women, for coaches, wives are just. And I told her, and we do. I said at 35, I'm done. We're going to travel. We're going to go places. I have 8 grandkids. I'm watching them play ball now, which is fun to watch them grow up.
Yeah.
And it's fun that, like I said before, you get to pick and choose now what high school games that you never would get to see because you were playing.
Yeah.
So it's fun to watch other programs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love it, and I appreciate you. And I said this before, you have been a mentor of mine. You've been an encourager of mine. And I say that because I have that example, but I've tried to carry that out myself now in retirement and make sure I'm encouraging those who played for me and coached for me and are now in their own professions. But I'll never forget those letters and those cards you sent. And I know almost every time I played Carbondale, and Marion would play Carbondale, Fred Heinz would be there to see me before the game, and we would talk a second.
Sure.
And I know you're still doing that for a lot of coaches, and you are still that encourager and that mentor, and don't ever underestimate that, Fred.
Well, you know, like I said, we've had a very good friendship, and I'm very proud of you. I am so happy to see the success that you had and your family as well. Yeah. And I just appreciate that. And
well, I was blessed by a lot of people to be able to do anything that I did, including my family, including great players and assistant coaches and guys like you who invested in me. So anything that I achieved was a we thing, not a me thing. So
you know, and I miss the old guys. I'll have to say that. I mean, I go to games now and I'm looking and I'm like, gosh, I don't know any of these staff or anybody. You know, and I know that really ages me now. And I'll see a few guys, you know, still out there. But it's a young man's sport now. And,
it is.
And it is fun that, you know, I always would tell kids at the end of the year, you had an opportunity to play the game. If you have an opportunity to give something back, I'd tell them, go coach junior football.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you get a chance to go to the high school, but give something back because you had this rare opportunity. And it's like you said, it's good to see former players. And now, of course, I'm seeing kids of former players playing, and that ages you as well.
I know, yeah, it does.
But I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
And,
well, no, this is great. And I couldn't have done this for the 2 years I've done it without having you on here as a way of reflecting on your great career, but also to say thank you. And you're looking at 2 guys with a combined coaching career of 70 years, and neither one ever got fired.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what's
a rare thing,
you know, something we didn't touch on was we had an opportunity to do the All-Star teams together.
We did.
And I really looked forward to it. Then we did the Southern Illinois, gosh, it was the Coal Bowl and this and that. Then it evolved, and then we did the Southern Illinois All-Stars versus Western Kentucky All-Stars.
Those were good times.
And a chance to work with you on a personal level and your staff. And I got to bring my son along. He was little, but that was a big moment for him, and he still remembers all those things.
That's a regret. I had, outside of the All-Star games, we never got to work together after Benton, and I wish there would have been a chance to do that. But but I still say you were an important part of everything I've done, everywhere I've been, and I appreciate it. And I want to say thanks, man. You're the best. Appreciate you, Fred.
it. Thank you.
Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you watching. And we've got some great guests coming up in the next few weeks. And I want to thank Ross and Abby again and Swinford Media for being here and putting this together. I want to thank my buddies at Adrenaline. I want to thank Crown Brew and just thank you for tuning in every single week and the encouragement you give me and the feedback. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.